Lyric and I actually first met in 2005 at an after-school arts program in Harlem. It was our first job coming out of college. And one of our students there was arrested by the FBI, a young 16-year-old Muslim girl named Adama Ba. And she was accused of being a potential suicide bomber. And over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, the government deported her father. They tried to deport her. She had an ankle bracelet on her leg. She had to be home every night at 10 o'clock. She had to drop out of high school to support her 4 younger siblings. Her mother had a nervous breakdown, didn't really speak English. So as a result of that accusation, I saw her, her family absolutely destroyed. And I love this, this woman and her family, and I ended up making a film about them. And Lyric is also very close to them. And so it was that kind of love for her and rage about what is happening on a larger scale and how the informants are really kind of the centerpiece of the domestic war on terror. The counterterrorism campaign is there. They use these cases to perpetuate kind of the ever-present local consistent fear and illusion of danger amongst the public imagination. And I thought it's such an important issue. It's important for more people to know about it. Reports had been coming out, but it hadn't really, it still hasn't caught. I don't know when it will kind of really capture a broader public, the broader attention. But I thought if there is one story that could potentially lure in people who aren't invested in this and don't have any reason to care about what happens to Muslim Americans, it could be a spy thriller. I thought a story about an informant would be a fascinating way to lure people in, trick them into thinking that they're just seeing, a movie, and then through the course of that film, confront them with the reality of how these cases are being, carried out. And I happened to mention this idea to Lyric after I finished my first film. She was like, "What are you working on now?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love to make a film about an informant, but that's probably not going to happen because how are you going to find an informant?" And she said, "It's funny you should say that because I happen to know one."
But I would say that to your question of anger, it's a great question, right? Because our main character is arguably a villain, but he's presented in a little bit more of a nuanced way. So what I will say is, it's very rare for an informant to allow a camera crew on an active counterterrorism sting without informing the FBI. So by virtue of sort of that access, the film is the judgment, right? The film is the film is a piece of work. Hopefully is a reflection of our anger. Hopefully is a reflection on us as filmmakers, sort of our perception of the issues. But when you're dealing with people, actual humans, if we were to get this man to fully reveal himself and feel entirely comfortable on screen, we can't judge him. And that's what I have to learn as a journalist. The best pieces of reporting are those in which you can humanize, like a Dylan Roof, who went into, that church in South Carolina, to be able to sit down with him and actually get him to feel comfortable and to tell you a motivation. That's a skill, right? And that cannot, that's my job, sort of as a journalist. I don't bring anger. I genuinely bring genuine curiosity, and sort of the edit of the film, the compendium. Yes, it's a very angry testament, but actually in working with people day to day, because they are humans, I couldn't be angry. Because if either of us were to approach him in anger, oh, you're so messed up, you're a villain, half of the information in this film wouldn't be on the public record.
I should have clarified, I was actually angry at the FBI. I wasn't angry at the informant. The informant I felt sympathy for because he was used, and he was used incorrectly, I think. He was doing what, like he was saying, I can't get a job. What else is he going to do? And they have him on everything. So, I was actually mad at the FBI because they get to go home to their nice houses, spend time with their kids. Neither one of them has to worry about jail time, but they're destroying families intentionally to make a villain for everybody else. So that's who I was mad at, actually. And that's what I thought maybe you guys might have felt anger towards them as well. And you can't do anything about it. Can't say anything to them, And they're probably not even watching the documentary, you know what I mean?
They've watched it.
Do they? That's true. They're watching everything, right?
I don't like to use the mic, sweetheart. I got a big mouth. Oh, you need it for the video? Hello about that, right? I have to commend you all. Excellent job. And I done seen this already at the Tribeca. And we need this because after the Newburgh sting, we needed another piece. And you've been, we got history. We needed this for families because we've been out here fighting the government and standing up on our own. When this happened to us, by the way, my name is Alicia McWilliams. I'm the Honor David Williams of the Newburgh Sting. We needed this piece because when this happened to us, we didn't know what the hell to do. Y'all wasn't angry. I wanted to throw his ass in the oven. Sorry. I wanted to push him every time he was baking. Trust me. Because her son, our family, even though you met at the FBI, it does destroy lives. What we went through was hell. When we had Homeland Security, FBI, we didn't know what the hell to do. We were scared, but we fought and stood and fought in front of fear because that's our loved ones. And so I say, fuck the government, fuck the FBI, because you cannot use us in this way and pull us in a political game. It's all about the funding. So we need this piece, and I like this piece because it's showing what the informants is doing. And no one seems to care. But us little people, Project SALAM, little moms and pops who came and helped us, and Lyric followed me throughout the whole 2009, my crazy ass. She followed me fighting my nephew's case. But this young journalist was the only black journalist. It was no African Americans who came to help us, and I'm sorry to say, my people didn't come out and help. God, for human rights, people didn't come and help us. So we need this right now. And I'm glad, I have to commend y'all, and everybody needs to see this. This needs to be in a bigger theater. No, really, what's going on right now with after post 9/11 and what they're doing in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.
Has there been any reaction towards the subject of this film, The Informant, from the FBI? The FBI must have seen a copy of this film.
They didn't see it by our hand. We asked them for comment at a stage where the film was sort of done, but before public exhibition. So they had a few months to really become a full participants in the film. They did not offer comment. They have yet to offer comment, even though the film's sort of been out since January. As far as repercussions for Saeed, principally up to this point, we've just been showing at film festivals and small sort of colleges and screenings like this, which is sort of an elite audience and not necessarily the mass audience that we want to reach. So we were on BBC starting last week. And so we will also be on public television here on February 22nd. And so I say those statistics just because it's a hard question to assess as of yet, right? Like the people that arguably may feel some type of way and want to hurt him will not come to Sundance. They will not be at Tribeca, right? But they will have public television for free in their homes. And so, your question is almost too soon to answer. As far as his sort of relationship with the FBI, per the last scene till about a month ago, it was cricket. But Paris, interestingly enough, reopened channels of communication. He still... He don't... No. No. But so he wants to work again. He seems to think that this... per the precedent set by Shahid Hussein, who was in the Newberg Sting film, pretty prominently identified, and then he was used sort of again in Pittsburgh. So per the precedent that the FBI itself has set in reusing informants over and over, he seems to think that he can still be valuable.
It's on. Okay. I was wondering what Saeed's motivation for allowing you to film him was or is, if you knew that. I mean, I have some assumptions I'm making, but I was wondering if you really knew his motivation. I don't know why an informant would allow himself to be filmed.
I think Saeed wants acknowledgement for what he's done. He's worked with other agents who have gone off and published New York Times best-selling books. In those books, they mention him, they talk about him, and he felt that he keeps a folder of newspaper clippings of his previous cases, and highlights all the words where it says unidentified informant, and I think he wants recognition for what he's done. I think I know that he wants a book deal. He wants to, sell his story, profit off of it, and I think maybe in some way he wants to kind of talk to the community that has exiled him, and to have some sort of chance to tell his story and explain his motivations for why he did what he did when he did, how it all began. Because I think, there's that moment when he testified in Tariq's co-defendant's trial. And friends and community members came out and saw him, but they just saw him testifying on the stand. They didn't have a chance to hear his whole story. And I think he is potentially seeing the film as his way to communicate to them and say, this is the broader picture. I don't think he's asking for forgiveness. He's not apologizing, but I think he does want to make some sort of communication. I know that he misses having a community. He misses, the world that he's kind of been forced out of.
Yeah, and as you see in the film, he's not someone who's repentant. I can't honestly tell you he feels bad, but it's like David said, it's sort of an unburdening, right? He's an older man. He's thinking about legacy. He's thinking about how his young child will perceive him once he's gone. And I think, yeah, this was just an attempt to get it on the record.
Is there a central thought that we should leave with as a result of seeing this film?
I think Alicia articulated it pretty clearly.
Yeah, it impacts families. We never really see the humans behind the statistics when terrorists are mentioned for popular consumption. It's a quick headline, so-and-so did this, There's no real explication about the community from which that person is a part. There's no explication about how their mother feels, or, just no other voice other than the voice of damnation that is provided by our government's press releases typically. And so this film was just an attempt to sort of, it's not black or white terrorism. There's very much gray. And so this film was just an attempt to sort of enrich the gray and just to show alternate perspectives that are not often seen. A mother who has to still pay child support while her child is incarcerated. Like, people don't think about that. The fact that you have to drive, all these hours to go and visit someone. So just really looking at the impacts of terrorism beyond the traditional means that, that the news typically shows.
I like that phrase, enrich the gray. That seems to be the conclusion to draw.
I'd just like to speak a moment to that. That what this film to me really shows is that the FBI is creating cases and then solving cases to make us think that we're safe. And what they're doing is absolutely despicable.
I'm curious about something that right at the end with the charge that was made about a illegal weapon or something. Did you make any inquiries into the NRA as to whether they had the basis for a class action suit? I mean, they seem to think that...
That's a great suggestion. We'll be sure to reach out to them.
Have Khalifa write a letter.
Technically, it was because he had a prior felony conviction, and so he was called a felon in possession of a firearm. He just didn't think that going to a public shooting range would count as possession, but it did. And I looked it up for him. He called me pre-trial, and I said, "Yeah, you got to take this deal because the way the case law was, it's really bad." Lynn, Stuart.
I just want to say the film is really bigger than what your subject matter is. And as I saw it, and this is the first time I saw it, but I've been anxious to see it, it lays out how the government chews them up and spits them out on both ends. The poor kid that goes to jail who is really a wannabe nothing, and the informant who thinks he is James Bond and thinks he can run the FBI, and maybe he is better at it than they are. But what I was going to ask, just from a legal point of view, is, was your film ever used by any of the lawyers as part of a sentencing memo or something to bring out why someone shouldn't get 8 years, even if it was a mandatory minimum, even if it was a deal, that really this was a case outside the ordinary, and this was a case the FBI had to make, and your film proved that, so that he wouldn't get the 8 years? I mean, have you ever used your film work in connection with actual courtroom proceedings on behalf of a defendant?
When he was sentenced, actually, we were neck deep in footage. The film had not yet been constructed, but that's a great suggestion. I don't know, Kathy, if you have any ideas about that.
Sounds like a good idea. It came out fairly recently, but yeah.
Well, to our point, we did. So Khalifa had a public defender in Pittsburgh, Marquetta Sims, and we did. Well, see, we ourselves could not reveal too much, right? Because we could have been in jail. The ACLU and the Center for Constitutional Rights told us that we would be in trouble for tampering with an active investigation. And so in that tamper, when Khalifa got arrested and we knew we had all this footage of him that could be exculpatory, we could not fully tell because we were still on the ground. But what we did tell his attorney loosely was that, because he was facing a gun charge, we had evidence of a terrorism case that was ultimately not made. So his attorney seemed to think that there was no evidence in the film in service of sort of litigating his gun charge.
Well, there are attorneys and there are attorneys.
Amen. But the attorney said that our film might be good for him for a civil suit because he does want to sue the FBI for harassment.
Peace. My prayers go out with your family, Sister Marlene. And I must say that this was a very powerful documentary, and I'm sitting here and it just kicked up a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings inside of myself because some of the people that they spoke about in the film, some of the people that they showed, I know personally. Imam Siraj, my father I grew up in Temple number 7, so I know Captain Joseph, and it was hurtful to see, how just when he talked about putting a thought in somebody's head and just having to speak a word, and all of a sudden he's a terrorist, I remember during the Afghanistan-Russian war during the early, the 80s, and there were a lot of foreigners coming over to Masjid Taqwa, and Imam Siraj and the brother Jamil Alameen, known better as H. Rap Brown, told us to stay away from a lot of those cats because they were trying to lead us down the wrong path. So the film was very powerful. It needs to be shown. This information needs to be out there. I'm part of a Conscious Mind movement in Albany, New York, and we'll be showing the Newburgh Sting on the 19th of December at the Albany Public Library on Henry Johnson Boulevard. And our purpose is to get a lot of this information out to the community. Sister Marlene, I would ask you if you had some words of advice for the young men and women in high poverty areas, in minority areas, and words of caution, what would you be able to tell them?
Today, you have to be very careful of who you're speaking to. I remember, I became a Muslim in the 50s with Malcolm. And I remember him saying many a time, Sister Marlene, everyone that gives you the greetings does not mean peace be unto you. So therefore, know who you're talking to. Make sure that that is what you would say a friend, not just someone that you met or someone that is trying. The problem with, I would say, with Tariq and with a lot of brothers, we were taught to share. We were taught that you want for your brother and your sister what you want for yourself. So therefore, if a brother or a sister would come to you and want help, you would do it. I used to tell Tariq all the time, I take a little step back. He used to say, Mommy, you're a skeptic. I said, that's why you where you are and why I'm where I am, because I am. What I used to tell him, you can't trust everybody. Even though you want to and you want to be a good brother, but that does not mean being, a good brother. The thing of it is that you have to stop and think of yourself, think of your family, and also try to think of, what a person, what their intentions are. Because a lot of their intentions, are to do what this informant has done. And he took him in and moved him into my house in the Bronx. Tariq was working like a dog trying to get that apartment ready. And for some reason, I had a very funny feeling. I never met the brother, but when Tariq said, Mommy, I'll vouch for him. I never, and he used to talk about him all the time. But I should have followed my gut. There was something there that I was leery. So they moved the brother in. The FBI moved the brother into my house in the Bronx. And I had the hardest time with the FBI getting him out, getting them out. Because they said to me, we don't have to move. Oh, yes, you do. I said, because Tariq doesn't own this house. I do. You have him in jail, but damn if you got me in jail. So either that stuff is out by tomorrow or it'll be on the sidewalk. You know, so these are the things that, you know, I just say you have to be very, very careful. If you don't have really long-time friends, you just can't meet somebody, or if someone comes to you and, you know, they need help and you start just, I would say, spilling your gut, whatever your thoughts are, you know. And this is what I'd like to caution a lot of young Muslim brothers and sisters and a lot of young people. Be careful of who you speak to and what's coming out of your mouth, because freedom of speech is not for everybody. It's certainly not for the Muslims, you know, and it wasn't for the Afro-Americans. And, you know, I came up during the Civil Rights era. My great-grandmother was a slave. So therefore, I know what, you know, we're going through today. One of the things that I'm very grateful of is that I came in with Malcolm. Malcolm named Tariq, because I was pregnant with Tariq. And when he found out it was going to be a boy, he said, name him Jebel Tariq, after Jebel Tariq, the Rock of Gibraltar. And I'll tell you, that to me was such a blessing, because Tariq has always been a follower of Islam. I mean, trust me, he believes in Allah, and that's the only thing that brought him through, because he was in solitary confinement for 33 months. And the reason why he got the 15 years, because he either had to take a plea deal, or because of the fact that 33 months, it was hard for him to go to trial. And the judge and the attorneys, what it is that in MCC, you're supposed to have what? Client, your privileges with your attorney. They listen to everything you say. Everything you say. So nothing that you say to your lawyer that they don't hear. So you are forced to either take a plea deal, or you wind up getting 30 years to life. So Tariq is the one that said, Mommy, I'm going to take the plea deal, because I feel that at least after 15 years, I'll be able to be with you. 30 years. And when he was sentenced, the judge said, we did you a favor, because I was ready to sentence you to 30 years or more. So it just shows you, it's already all pre-planned. You know what I'm doing? There's no fairness. And I would just say, when you talk to young sisters and brothers, just make them beware of their acquaintances and who they are around and what's coming out of their mouth. Because you could be angry and something coming out of your mouth and hear somebody else right next to you that will take those same words, twist them around. Next thing you know, you got the FBI knocking on your door, and they'll say your son or your daughter is involved, and it's like guilt by association or something they said, and you don't even remember what the hell you said. So you have to be careful with that.
Oh, and his co-defendant, Tariq's co-defendant, Rafiq Sabir, is a doctor, and he went to trial in that case, and he argued the Hippocratic Oath that he would treat anybody, including Al-Qaeda, and he's doing 30 years,
that's right.
which Tariq would be if he had gone to trial.
Right.
Let me just, in closing, the reason why I said it hit me very hard was that my father left the temple with Minister Malcolm. After Minister Malcolm's assassination, he went to California, he came back with the Black Panther Party for self-defense, and informants set them up in the Bronx, and they went up there and killed like 6 of them in a shootout in the Bronx headquarters. So it hits me real hard when I see stuff like this here.
But Malcolm used to say that there were brothers that are sitting out there that are FBI informants. And he used to always say, always repeat what I said, not what I didn't say. Don't add anything to the lecture. You know, what I say, I'll stand by. Just don't add anything to it.
I'll just add real quick that that's why I really, really wholeheartedly appreciate Marlene's participation in the film, because really nobody brings up COINTELPRO and talking about modern sort of counterterrorism tactics, and because COINTELPRO was, sort of associated with leftists and the American Indians and the black folks, it's like, even though it's the same strategic tactics that have been perfected actually in the war on terror, the exact same COINTELPRO things, but Marlene makes that link beautifully, because there were black Muslims who were targeted by COINTELPRO. There were black Muslims who were raised in COINTELPRO, like Tariq, arguably that they've been looking at him since his father, right? Been looking for a reason. So that is actually a tangible link, and that's why I really appreciate Marlene for being in the film.
Hi.
Yes. How? In what form? In cash. In cash.
So I just wanted to say sort of what I think an amazing learning and educational tool the film is on so many different levels. I mean, I was just like watching or listening to my emotions throughout kind of in the first half, and it's just a microcosm of kind of the larger society of what we're being taught or convinced is true, right? So the first half almost, it's kind of like there's like this rational justification for what he's doing and sort of that experience, and it lures you into that. And then, you sort of see it all unfold, and you see the experiences of families and communities and his experiences, and learning from that and the impact on so many people's lives. So I think it's a really powerful learning and conversational tool in the same way that we're having this here on so many different levels. So thank you for that, and congratulations for doing such a great job. Yeah.
I found myself in the days after the incident in France on November 13th saying, this is 9, 12, 13, 14 all over again. And the group personal amygdalas of the flight and fear in our brains becoming mass hysteria in France. And I followed it here in this country, and I just saw it coming on in France and Europe. And I'm wondering, when at the Project SALAM names on the wall, and your ability to have had the prior experience with a woman who was being blamed as being a potential bomber or suicide bomber, that you must have, I'm trying to put myself in your mindset, because you're not looking back at Khalifa's case retrospectively. You are in essence seeing a dead man walking in the making. And I'm wondering if there was any point that you felt a responsibility to say, you may be naive, but this is what's going to happen to you, regardless of what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first moment that Saeed showed us the Facebook page of Khalifa. He's like, oh, here's the guy, and seeing the picture of him and knowing exactly what was going to happen, knowing how these cases have played out. Yeah, there was a very strong urge, like, let's go run down the block and knock on this guy's house and tell him to get the fuck out of town. Stay away from Saeed. But, we had been told in no uncertain terms, any sort of behavior or actions to that effect would have us put in jail. We would absolutely be accused of tampering and could be, put into a position we absolutely did not want to be in. And would also, we recognize that this access had enormous potential to communicate to a much larger audience what was taking place. When we did begin filming finally with Khalifa, we made it, Lyric and I talked about it and agreed right away that if there was any sort of material that we possessed that could make a difference in his case, we would absolutely come forward with it. But as she said, it was a gun charge, and there was nothing in our hard drives that could erase the existence of that photograph.
Right. Yeah, they already had him from day one, even if they couldn't do the terrorism case. Because I remember talking to him and saying, is there anything they can do, to you? And he said no, and then I felt bad for going public with the email, not knowing that he had already put it on Facebook. But then I realized later that there was nothing that could have prevented that at that point. They already had that in their back pocket, so to speak, all along. And Marlene has to leave. She had to leave. She has to get up at 3:30 to go to work. So.
Anyway. And she's working so she can continue to pay child support every
Right.
her child. That's crazy.
Just to mention a little bit more. You got a point there. I just want to mention a little bit about Khalifa. One of the issues you have to, I don't know if people realize how difficult it is for people in prison to communicate with their family members. It's very hard. And Khalifa's wife was deported. She was actually not allowed back in the apartment except for just a short while to take some of her things away. And he now has his baby, who is an American citizen, is 4 years old, and they live in England. Now, so what at Project SALAM, we have a little tiny fund for Khalifa that I put $30 in his phone account so he could talk to his wife a couple times a month. And so if anyone would like to donate to it, there's a little blue bucket on our Project SALAM table in the back, and I would appreciate if you would like to donate just so that he can speak with his wife on occasion. The other issue is his wife is from, I believe, Somalia, and her English is, her written English isn't really that good, so it's hard for them to write letters. But everything in prison costs money. Everything costs money. If he wants to talk on the phone, if he wants to send email, there is email in prison. I've decided that makes it a lot easier for the FBI to follow what the prisoners say because they don't have to read the handwriting. All of this costs money, so my hope is to have a little tiny fund for him so that we can keep him in phone calls to his wife. And, the other thing is that if he wants to work, like you think, well, can't he work in prison to make money so he can call his wife? But the issue is that, for example, if he wants to work, he makes 18 cents a month or something?
18 cents an hour.
18 cents an hour, something like that. And it costs 5 cents a minute to use the email. So just do the math, it doesn't work out. Thanks.
This could be our last question, and then we'll just sit and talk with people.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just feeling the irony of having this discussion the day after San Bernardino, in which the FBI and the authorities seemed to be totally clueless as to what was going on, while they have this history of trying to set people up who really don't want to do anything. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
Well, I just want to preface, there's something in your comment, maybe I'm inferring wrong, that infers that San Bernardino was terrorism. I agree, it should be a unilateral definition of terrorism. Unfortunately, the only reason our government and sort of news media is saying it might be an act of terrorism is because the shooters were Muslim. So I think that's what it's bringing up for me. The fact that people are questioning motivations and only presenting Muslim names when there's another third shooter who probably is not Muslim, that's why we're not hearing the name. So in terms of safety and how public safety issues and concerns are presented, that was a mass shooting. Prior to yesterday, I have never heard of a mass shooting being called an act of terrorism, including Dylan Roof, who was racially motivated and killed 9 people in a Charleston church, right?
Well, some of us have.
Some of us have, but I think most mainstream media outlets have not reported on mass shootings as acts of terrorism. Yesterday, me personally, yesterday was the first mass shooting that I've heard equated with terrorism, and it happens to be because it was 2 Muslim suspects. So in response to that, I would say if the FBI, if we agree that's an act of terrorism, we need to apply that unilaterally across the board. White supremacist terror, when 4 people were shot after a Minneapolis Black Lives Matter protest, that's terror. Yesterday, San Bernardino, terror. No problem. If we understand this as terrorism, we just need to look for it everywhere, not just in the Muslim community. We need to go to, terrorists can be anyone. If we look at America and who has done these mass shootings, it can be anyone. It's been all races, it's been all religions, all faiths. If that is the case, not all religions, all faiths, all people are targeted in the war on terror. You know, so that's what this incident brings up for me, sort of this Islamophobia and the let's question motivations. And today, Texas passed a law saying no Syrian refugees. All of these things are sort of, you know, the root is Islamophobia. You know, and also the root of Islamophobia is none of us are safer. So, you know, that's what this sort of brings up for me. And I would encourage the FBI in an attempt to make all of us safer and eliminate terrorism, such as mass shootings, to look for the problem across the boundaries, not just in a mosque.
I just want to thank Project SALAM for being incredible, you know, working their butts off and doing such important work. I'm really grateful to you for everything that you're doing. Your beautiful commitment to this, and to Marlene and Alicia and all the family members who are there in the struggle with you. So thank you for your work.
Thanks. I just want to thank you guys for doing this amazing movie and for coming here and showing it here in the sanctuary, which I love the sanctuary. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.